It's not easy to put the pieces together and make sense of an issue that's become reality in Bangladesh, the issue of working children. But one thing straight from the outset, this reality is here to stay. The UNICEF aims to eradicate child labor in the country by 2016. The problem with this aim is that what's child labor in the West is literally a way of life in Bangladesh. The country has a GDP of only about £60 billion to go around 160 million people. That's almost one-third the money between thrice the people than in the UK. To compare differently, Bangladesh has 7.4 million working children. In the UK, 8 million children receive free primary education. That equation is a tough one to crack. But Shahidul Alam, the founder of Dhrik, a photojournalistic agency in Bangladesh, explained it better.
It's a very Western concept anyway. As children, we grew up in a particular way. Learning, working was one of the ways in which people learned. It was a form of apprenticeship. In the situation where formal education systems have failed so badly in teaching life skills to children, I've not actually seen that as a negative thing in itself. A whole lot of very valid social skills and survival skills come through children at a young age becoming inculcated into the normal way of life. It is when those children in that process are deprived of the other things that all children we expect will have that the problem comes in. Certainly education is one, care, loving, tenderness, the ability to play and enjoy, all of those sort of things are part and parcel of what growing up is about. And certainly when we grew up as children, we got all of that, and we also worked one way or another. I don't have a problem with that. Neither do I have a problem with recognizing that a child is a very valuable member of a family who has a role to play, and you cannot artificially separate it in the typical Western sense where that's a child, they grow up in a particular way at a certain time, at a certain stage. Based on national laws, these integrations take place. So I'm not suggesting that necessarily is the only way of looking at it.
The central point then is that as long as education and other basic rights are met, child labor should be regulated in Bangladesh and not banned altogether. The ban has proved ridiculously ineffective anyway. Less than 100 meters from children sitting at shops, policemen lull about minding traffic. But regulating the situation has been suggested before. In 1998, a documentary was made about how the earn and learn policy should be implemented in Bangladesh's booming garment industry. There are reasons why this seems sensible. You take a given group of kids and ask them how many are working, they'll tell you that they all do.
আচ্ছা কেউ গার্মেন্টসে কাজ করে এমন কেউ আছে
So since children are evidently going to be in employment, it's probably better that they work in a place like this than like this. But it's far less simple than that. In 1992, the International Labour Organization framed the International Protocol for the Elimination of Child Labour. Ever since then, garment factories in Bangladesh have faced constant international backlash. So this is what they now look like from the outside. Tall, forbidding structures with grilled windows and guarded gates. On managing to get inside, however, it's a different story. The workers are jovial, the machines are busy, but the air is clean and the heat unoppressive. Yes, the needles are sharp, but it's a skill one learns with age, and there are other less harmful sections in the meantime, such as cutting and storing. Cases of maltreatment have been recorded within the garment industry too, but that could be there anywhere. For instance, here, or here. But maltreatment is not the norm, and after work in a garment factory, when labourers such as these teenagers leave at the end of the day, their countenance is usually happy.
In Thailand, you've got garment factories situated in villages and communities where the people have not been taken away from the communities through this, and it's a social structure where educational systems and all the other things that you would want for are part and parcel of that factory itself. So the factory is a living environment where children can grow and work, and you have creches for children so women can work. All of that sort of thing needs to be built into the structure itself. And I'll give you a little example. There's a friend of mine who set up a garment factory which worked very well. He had decent wages, he had a creche, he looked after people, and he said something very interesting. He says, you're looking at this as some magnanimous act that I'm doing. I'm actually being a good businessman. I have higher productivity. I don't have, retention problems. I meet all my deadlines. At the end of the day, my bottom line's a lot better than it otherwise might have been.
So what this means is that if this business or even a humanitarian model is replicated in Bangladesh, the focus should ideally be shifted to the countryside, away from Dhaka. The capital city with its manic traffic, crowded streets and resulting pollution is not always the best place for a working child. 12-year-old Bilal came to Dhaka a year ago. He works in this house and has it relatively easy. What he doesn't have is the loving care of home. And that's where even he would rather be. So this rural setting might well be the ideal environment for a Bangladeshi child to work in. Being at home is of course one benefit, but apart from that, the hand-pedaled nature of villages is such that workshops tend to look like this, and not, once again, like this. But shifting focus away from the epicenter of Dhaka to rural areas is easier said than done.
The Bangladesh actually is very much centered to the Dhaka. We cannot yet so people are coming here. That is why they are coming. That is the reason. And if you again go for the good educational institute, good treatment, whatever the goods are there, all concentrated in Dhaka. And who are providing these good services, they are also not interested to go to the outside of Dhaka because all facilities concentrated here. So I don't know if government decentralization policy work, then maybe we don't need such kind of apprenticeship because then ultimately people will not come to Dhaka. So that may be the one kind of. So how we can push the things, the decentralization of this kind of political boundaries as well as the economic activities and other things.
2016 would have probably come and gone by the time this decentralization ultimately does come about. And working children won't lie sleeping in the meantime. So the government has proposed corrective measures, or what it calls the safety net program.
Safety net program will be like that government will provide 1 year long support. So children will adopt it within this period. They will be given vocational or some training to convert them from that harmful sector to a less harmful sector or non-harmful sectors. So that will give them continue their livelihood as well as they will be educated or trained up to do something. That will help them. And that must be the crash program that as we have UNICEF or Bangladesh government have committed for 2016. Then 2016, what is the plan of the 2016? What is the plan of the first year? What is our milestones? How we'll be able to understand this is the measure, the progress. So that would be taken in the action plan.
Proposing such projects is in the right direction, but implementing them has been a complex issue in Bangladesh.
I think part of the problem really lies in the fact that the stakeholders, in this case the poor, do not have a say in how their lives are governed. And that's a problem not just with garment workers, that's a problem with our countries by and large. The owners are not accountable. The people who run our country don't really care. And you've got to think of the mechanisms that would create pressure for change of this sort to take place. Now, if there is no decent education system, if there's no healthcare system, if there are all the basic things that we don't have, and that affected the elite in my country, I think there would be a pressure to change things. It doesn't. The elite is immune to all of those sort of things that happen. Their children will study overseas, they will go to Singapore for treatment, they will have all the facilities and all the perks that this poor nation can provide. Hence, their lives are fine, and there's no pressure upon them to bring about a change, regardless of what sort of governmental changes take place. I mean, we call ourselves a democracy. All it means is there's a change of face at the top every 5 years. It doesn't result in the average person in the street having a voice in any way. And while that is the case, for me, that is the ultimate corruption. The fact that there's an entire nation of poor people who do not have a say in how their lives are run.
If the poor are to have this voice they need, education is the only answer. Meanwhile, a working life is inevitable for most of their children. Regulating the system could help streamline that work into safer sectors, such as garments. It's by far the country's biggest industry, and there's enough scope within it to implement a culture of apprenticeship. But this culture could extend beyond garment factories to other chemical-free sectors. The scale of child labor in Bangladesh is that immense. So it's probably better that the children are apprentices in shops as opposed to beggars on the street. And what's best is if it's closer to home than in a chaotic city. But for a child labor-free future, whenever that arrives, schooling has to go hand in hand with the apprenticeship. Save the Children runs this learning center in Khulna. These need to mushroom across the country. The onus for that lies with the country's elite. They are the ones with the power and the money to make the changes. For the poor are just too crippled to give their children the education they need. And that remains the vital link in solving the puzzling problem that child labor in Bangladesh is.